Hi guys, Aaron Dorr here with Iowa Gun Owners. And if you followed this Facebook page or we got our emails for more than about 5 minutes, you know we don't pull any punches here in the Capitol when it comes to our defense of your gun rights. I'm going to warn you right now, this video will be the longest one you've seen on our page in a long time, perhaps the nastiest, because guys, it's time to clear the air about what's going on down here in Des Moines and has been for quite some time. It's unfortunate that we have to do this. It's unfortunate when you have to air dirty family laundry in a public platform like this. But guys, we did not start this fight. It's important that you guys, though, know the truth. While our primary focus is to advance pro-gun bills like stand your ground law this year, there's been a lot of things happening behind the scenes this year that you guys have to know about. The bottom line is, guys, there's a sickness in this building. There's an incestuous, dirty little deal going on in this building that we've not had to tell you about in the past, but now you should know what's going on. You see, for most organizations that come down here to Des Moines to lobby on an issue, whatever the issue is, they have about two choices. They hire a contract lobbyist or they have a citizen lobbyist on their behalf come down here to the Capitol and try to advance their legislation. And what they do, because their whole thing is based on having access and friendship with politicians, is they make it their mission to be the most loved, the most respected, and the biggest pushover in this building. And they have an appeasement philosophy that will never allow them to call a spade a spade. Will never allow them to hold politicians accountable. And if they ever saw a politician say something nasty about them on the floor of the legislature, it'd be the death of their careers, because they're based on appeasement and their access to politicians. And for years now, that has been how the Iowa Firearms Coalition has operated here in Des Moines. It's true. Their lobbyist, Richard Rogers, comes down here 4 days a week. He pretty much owns that table right up there in that corner, and he stands there 12 hours a day sometimes, the way it seems, trying to talk to every single legislator and kiss their tails and make sure everybody likes him and loves him. And he'll never do anything to jeopardize that, because his whole philosophy, as well as the leadership team of the Iowa Firearms Coalition, is based on appeasement. Our organization is radically different. We were founded on the very simple idea that the politicians in Des Moines, they work for us. So we don't come down here to beg politicians. We don't come down here to plead with them or whine and try to beg them. We don't care for the most beloved organization here in the Capitol. What we do is we tell these guys, look, it's very simple. You vote for the bill, and if you don't, we'll hold you accountable in front of gun owners in your district at election time. This is no armchair organization. We're happy to get out there with our walking shoes and go house to house and expose you in your district, as we've done for years. And a couple comments, too, at the macro perspective on how we lobby. It also affects the way we lobby. You see, we don't care if they like me or if they like the board chairman or anybody else. Our job, my job, the organization's job is to educate and inform Iowa gun owners, the members of our organization, and the activists on our Facebook page, and encourage you guys to call and email and message your guys on Facebook and see them at forums and make sure that you can lobby directly on your own behalf. Because no politician up here cares what one lobbyist thinks. They're just one voice. You're just one vote. But by harnessing hundreds of thousands of gun owners together, we've been able to create an unstoppable force here in the advancement of our gun rights. And it's not based on anything that I have done. It's based on the fact that all of you are engaged in this fight. And so out of the gate, you can see that we couldn't give a heck less what politicians think about us, what they say about us, or how they treat us on the House floor. We are fully, happily agreed to and embrace confrontational politics. And we are willing to call a spade and hold these guys accountable if that's what's necessary to advance bills. As a result of that, politicians down here in Des Moines, they love the Iowa Firearms Coalition, and they hate Iowa gun owners. And we're okay with that because we know what's effective at moving bills. That's kind of the 30,000-foot view. But guys, here's what happened this year in 2017. Here's how this fight played out, and here's a story you were never told by the Iowa Firearms Coalition in the fight to pass Stand Your Ground law this year. At its base, Stand Your Ground law consists of kind of a three-part tripod, if you will. You have to have a removal of the duty to retreat. You have to have criminal and civil immunity language, and you have to have third-party defense. If you don't have these things, you don't have stand your ground law. And perhaps one of the most important parts of this is criminal and civil immunity language. What that means is that if you are involved in a use of force situation where you had to stand your ground, you're presumed innocent, and there is immunity language that protects you from criminal and civil prosecution as long as you were justified in the use of that force. If you don't have those protections, we don't have stand your ground law. That's how the bill was drafted by the National Rifle Association in the first state where this passed, down in Florida. And that's how our bill was drafted, because the NRA drafted the bill that we have been using here in Iowa for years, because they had a really good bill with great experience on this issue. And we're happy to take the best language we could and put that in play here in the legislature. That's the bill that got introduced this year in the Senate. Senate File 262 by Senator Rick Bertrand, and that quickly racked up 24 or 25 co-sponsors on the bill. Sadly, a couple weeks later, when the Iowa House unveiled their version of Stand Your Ground law, led by Representative Matt Windschitl, this bill contained no such language. There was no protection for criminal immunity language if you use a firearm for self-defense. But then, as the bill got read in for the first time, all the anti-gun pressure began to mount here in the Capitol where I'm at right now. The Des Moines paper attacked it. The Des Moines police chief came down here and attacked the bill. The Nonpareil attacked the bill. The Gazette attacked the bill. Anti-gun legislators like Mary Wolfe and Breckenridge and all these guys and gals, they attacked the bill, and the pressure began to mount. And Representative Windschitl, who was a pro-gun legislator, is, before all else, 100% pro-Matt Windschitl. And so as the pressure began to mount, and with him trying to maintain his dangerous personal entanglements and friendships with legislators down here in Des Moines, he choked in the House committee on this bill right down that hallway from where I'm standing right now when gun owners needed him most. This was back in early March. I was sitting there in the committee hearing, watching this bill come up for a vote, when suddenly there was a caucus called. And what a caucus means is that everybody who's not elected gets out of the room, and these guys had the room to discuss the bill and discuss changes to the bill. And after an approximate 4-hour-long delay, an amendment was drafted and offered on this bill by Representative Matt Windschitl. And what the amendment would do, besides not having stand your ground law immunity language in it, would weaken Capitol carry to only include this building, whereas the original draft included the entire Capitol campus down here in Des Moines. Next on the chopping block was preemption reform. You see, in its original draft, the bill would assume that the state of Iowa would get involved and defend any violations of preemption law. What that would mean is that if North Liberty, who of course tried to ban guns so infamously a couple of years ago, if they pass an ordinance, the state of Iowa would say, nope, that's not going to work here in the state of Iowa. But now, with the amendment offered by Matt Windschitl, as he desperately tries to maintain his friendships here in Des Moines, now the bill requires you or me to engage a lawyer. You have to sue your city government. You have to take City Hall to court on your dime, on your nickel, because he ran an amendment because anti-gunners were screaming for him to do so down here in Des Moines. But that wasn't the only thing, because next on the chopping block was constitutional carry. Constitutional carry is one of the biggest and hottest issues in gun rights politics in America over the last couple of years, and the original draft of this bill contained constitutional carry. In the amendment, in the committee, that night, under the gun, Matt Windschitl choked and took constitutional carry out of House File 517. Next up on the list of the chopping block for Matt Windschitl to protect his friendships was the bill that would remove the permit to purchase handguns. That was the original draft of this bill when it first was introduced. It would remove those permits because no one should have to get a permit from the government to buy a defensive firearm. No law-abiding person should especially. And this initial bill had that in there to remove that permit. But after a horde of screams that came from anti-gun organizations across the state, Matt Windschitl choked on that and put that back in the bill. I got to tell you, sitting there that night, watching all these anti-gun legislators praise him for all of the common sense reforms he's willing to make and for his willingness to concede on key issues, it about turned my stomach. But he did it. He did it to protect his friendships and to protect his entanglements here in the Capitol. And the entire time, you know who stood there alongside of him, who held their heads in guilty silence and said nothing? It was the Iowa Firearms Coalition. They were right there with their lobbyists, Barry Snell and Richard Rogers. They were right there. They read what I read. They saw what I saw, and they choked as well. And they sold too many of their members down the river by never telling them what happened on this bill. I didn't even clear the hallway before we were doing Facebook Live videos telling gun owners about the dreadful harm that had just taken place on Stand Your Ground law and the rest of the House File 517. We then got about the business over the next 24 to 48 hours of informing as many Iowans as we could. We shot Facebook videos just like this, which we boosted so a whole lot of people saw. We dropped mail to our supporters. And that may explain something. If this is the first time you're hearing this, it's probably because our supporters get direct mail from us with updates like this, and they got that to know what was happening going on here. So if this is the first time you're hearing this, that may explain why. We dropped robocalls, everything we could to pour phone calls into this building over the 4 or 5 days in between that committee vote and the full House vote to make sure that we fix this problem on Stand Your Ground law. And after an avalanche of phone calls and pressure from gun owners, Matt Windschitl buckled again, this time in favor of the Second Amendment, thank God, and he ran an amendment on the House floor to put back into the bill the immunity language on Stand Your Ground law. Sadly, we could only afford the effort to fix the Stand Your Ground law provision. The Iowa Firearms Coalition sat idly by as the rest of these things, capital carries, full version, constitutional carry, all these things fell and never came back into the bill. I also make kind of a moment here, a side note on who I'm talking about with the Iowa Firearms Coalition. Like our organization, the grassroots supporters of this organization are the salt of the earth. You guys just want to see your gun rights protected, you want to see anti-gun politicians stopped, and you want to see your gun rights protected and advanced any chance that we can. You guys are not the problem. The problem you have is your leadership. It's weak. They come down here, they spend all day long up here kissing a bunch of politicians' backsides, and they're weak, and it's got a funny smell to it, and nobody respects that. They do all appreciate that, though. I'll be clear about that. The best way for a politician to love you and sing your praises is to cover their back in guilty silence when they weaken your bills. And that's exactly what's happened here this year on the fight for Stand Your Ground law. Thankfully, again, after an avalanche of calls, the bill was fixed on the Stand Your Ground front anyway in the House floor. But that explains why Representative Windschitl goes to the floor and has his almost crybaby tirade attacking our organization because we held him to account. We exposed what he did on this bill. Sadly, it's not the only time he's done this. You see, in 2015, 2016, as the fight for Stand Your Ground law was white hot down here in Des Moines with Steve Sodders and Mike Gronstall and others, these guys all knew they were going to try to kill this bill. But they all wanted to find something to campaign on, something to hang their hat on at election time. So they worked with Representative Windschitl to bring forth an omnibus bill. And like this year's omnibus bill, the bill from that year started out really good. It had some great language in it, nothing bad in it, didn't have some of the better parts we wanted to see, but overall it was a solid bill. However, when the bill passed from the House over to the Senate, Senator Sodders demanded a couple pounds of flesh, including for the first time here in Iowa, a searchable online database of every Iowan with a permit to carry or purchase handguns. And there were no exceptions on who could query this database. So if somebody had your name and either one of the three things, your birthday, your address, or your phone number, with those two things, they could walk into the sheriff's office and they could bypass our confidentiality clause and ask to see if you had a permit. And there was no restriction. So convicted sexual predators could query as well. They could see if your daughter, if your granddaughter, if your wife, or if you had a permit to carry or purchase handguns here in Iowa. And Matt Windschitl signed off on that deal. More than that, the Iowa Firearms Coalition signed off on that deal. You didn't hear about this from them. They signed off on it, and our gun rights suffered as a consequence, at least initially. But not caring what politicians think about me and about our organization here in Des Moines, we went on the attack on this bill, sounded the alarm with everything we had, email, social media, mail, the whole 9 yards, and thankfully this bill died. And there is no searchable online database of firearms owners here in the state of Iowa. But the Iowa Firearms Coalition sat there and did nothing. And don't take my word for it. You can check the Facebook page of former Senator Steve Sodders, who publicly praised these guys and people in the House, we presume that had to mean Matt Windschitl, for their willingness to work on this kind of a bill. Did you get that? Like one of the most anti-gun legislators in the state praising the Iowa Firearms Coalition. In what world does that make any sense? Thankfully, that bill died. But that was the second time that Matt Windschitl and his friends of the Iowa Firearms Coalition choked when you guys needed them the most. But guys, that's not it. There's more, because in 2012, right here in the floor beneath me where I'm standing right now, the Republicans controlled the chamber at that time. And in the Republican-controlled Public Safety Committee, then chairman and current chairman Clell Bodler had a bill in his committee that would deal with the preemption issue. The preemption reform bill, very simply, would deny cities and counties the ability to ban firearms on their property. Of course, it's not their property, it's the taxpayers' property. That's besides the point. But the bill would limit their ability to ban guns. But Representative Bodler, the chairman of the committee, ran an amendment with Representative Rick Olson, one of the leading anti-gun members of the committee and of this building. He's from over here in the east side of Des Moines. That would radically weaken the bill by granting 5 different exceptions so the cities could still ban guns in a whole bunch of areas on their property. The Iowa Firearms Coalition and Matt Windschitl, they were right there, right beside me, and they choked again. You heard nothing about this drastic reduction in your gun rights from them. You heard about it from us because we knew that if we passed a bill that was watered down like this, we would never get a chance to fix that again. And that's a great point on the Stand Your Ground law fight this year as well. Had we passed Stand Your Ground law without the immunity language, the entire state would have assumed that we'd fix this problem. And our ability to fix that would have been negated for 10 or 15 years until pressure would build back up again. And so we sounded the alarm in 2012, and thankfully that bill did not become law, which set us up to hopefully fix it in the future. Later on that year, again in 2012, Representative Bodler, again in his Public Safety Committee, had a right to keep and bear arms amendment offered in the committee. A very good thing that Iowa desperately needs. Again, Representative Bodler brokered an amendment with anti-gun Democrats in the committee hearing that day, and they put that bill as amended onto the floor, and it was a massive step backwards for gun owners. But you heard none of this from the Iowa Firearms Coalition. You heard none of this from Matt Windschitl. They sat there, they choked on it, hung their heads in guilty silence, and did nothing. But guys, even that's not the end of it. In 2011, we're going back now for years. In 2011, in the House chamber, ferocious pro-gun champion and our bill sponsor, then Representative Tom Shaw, put constitutional carry on the floor for a House vote. Again, this is in April of 2011. Representative Matt Windschitl, trying to keep the Speaker of the House happy to protect his career advancement opportunities, worked overtime to whip votes against constitutional carry, against your gun rights. And as a result, constitutional carry failed that year. But the entire time, he was aided by the Iowa Firearms Coalition, who loudly and publicly had his back and said, this is a bad bill, it was the wrong timing, too extreme, and all the rest of this mumbo-jumbo on why now wasn't the time to fight for the Second Amendment. You guys, this has been going on for years. But you've heard none of that from the Iowa Firearms Coalition. In their desperate attempt to be relevant, to be liked, and to have their ears tickled down here by politicians, they have sat by in guilty silence, and your gun rights suffered for it. Think of all the times you guys, if you're an IFC member, have heard to call the Capitol and support legislation, never knowing that the bill you were calling in defense of had been gutted, stripped, weakened, and stuffed down the toilet by pro-gun legislators, all because Richard Rogers and Barry Snell and these guys will never tell you the truth. That's been going on for far too long. You may be asking yourself, well, if you're always, in their face and trying to hammer through bills and you have an anti-gun majority like with Mike Gronstal, don't we have to make deals? Don't we have to have compromise to advance our gun rights? And the answer is absolutely not. We don't mind incremental steps forward. If the bill is clean and can move forward, and it's a partial accomplishment of our goals, we'll happily take that. But it never worked that way down here. Mike Gronstal and Steve Sodders always demanded a pound of flesh, and they always got it from Matt Windschitl and the Iowa Firearms Coalition. Again, in 2015, 2016, what they got was a searchable online database. Every time they ask for some kind of a step backwards for the Second Amendment, pro-gun groups have to draw a line and say no over our dead bodies. So if we can get clean, incremental advancements, we'll take them. If it requires a step back of our gun rights, we'll never support that. On the contrary, we're willing, we're happy, we love to get engaged in election fights in their district. We're a 501c4, so to be clear, we can't tell you who to vote for, who to support, who to oppose. What we can do, what we do, what we love to do, is to expose anti-gunners and educate gun owners about where the candidates stand here in Des Moines and in these districts in the fight for the Second Amendment. Of course, as you guys all know, in 2016, this fight focused primarily on 4 targets. We knew we had to get engaged in the Senate. We knew we had 4 key people who were the most vulnerable and responsible for killing Stand Your Ground law. That was Mike Gronstal, Steve Sodders, Mary Jo Wilhelm, and Brian Shanejohn. And we attacked in those districts with everything we had. With your support and with all the support of our donors, we spent right at $150,000 on TV ads, on radio ads, on direct mail, on social media that was cutting edge and blanketed the state, on slicks, and because we're not an armchair gun rights organization, we were out there, I was out there, my kids were out there, teams of volunteers were out there going house to house. We put down 25,000 plus flyers in these districts telling everybody where these candidates stood. And as a result of that, of course, as you guys know, gun owners did the rest. And all of these guys were booted out of office. You see, if you hold the line here in the Capitol, where I'm standing right now, if you don't take a deal, if you don't take a compromise, if you're not complicit in bills being weakened, you then have the distinct pleasure and the high honor of being able to go out there at election time and hammer these guys and hold them accountable and hope that gun owners do the rest. And you guys have never let us down. This whole last year, the Iowa Firearms Coalition, as far as I know, totally AWOL in this fight. The National Rifle Association thankfully did their orange postcards every year, and we appreciate that. But nothing can beat the multi-layered approach that we use with radio and TV and slicks and mail and social media and house to house. And guys, it was devastating. But that wasn't our only year doing that, because in 2014, after we had watched then Senator Darrell Beal make a savage attack on our gun rights in the wake of the Columbine shooting, he put forth a bill, Senate File 233, which would create which would create, for the first time here in Iowa, a universal firearms registry for every transfer of firearms in the state. If you wanted to loan an 870 shotgun to your friend for a pheasant opener, you had to go through a government permission process first, add his name and that firearm to a government database to get permission. If you wanted to give a firearm to your nephew for Christmas, same thing. Only after that person's name and that firearm were checked through and added to a government database. We worked overtime to stop that bill in 2013, 2014, with then state senator, now U.S. Senator Joni Ernst. And that bill was shut down, but we remembered what he did. And in 2014, we were out there in towns like Humboldt and Pocahontas and Lorenz and Fort Dodge and all over those 3 counties, making sure every gun owner knew what Darrell Beal had done. And as a result, pro-gun Senator Tim Kreinbrink was elected, sent down here to Des Moines, who now cast one of the votes just last week on Stand Your Ground law. You see, if you hold the line, if you hold these guys accountable in their districts, you can change the body. You can reshape the entire legislature. And that's how we've moved gun bills this year. Going back further, 2012, I told you Representative Tom Shaw had forced a vote on constitutional carry in 2011. One of the guys who was loudly opposing this, one of the guys who would not sign our candidate survey the next year, and one of the guys who was attacking our organization was then House Majority Whip Eric Helland. Talk about making the powers that be angry by attacking the House Majority Whip. That's what we did. Our PAC endorsed his opponent. Our nonprofit organization exposed Eric for what he'd been doing, and as a result, Jake Highfield became the new House rep from Johnston in 2012. But see, you would never dare do that if you were afraid of making people angry. How could you? They may say bad things about you on the House floor, but we didn't care, and Eric Helland, he's gone. Same thing happened in 2010. We were then a much newer, smaller, and less capacity organization, but we had a vote the year before in the legislature for the first time on constitutional carry. We now knew for the first time who was pro-gun, who was anti-gun. And we worked as hard as we could that year to hold them accountable. All we had back then was mail and email. That's all we had, but we used it as well as best we could in 28 different races in both chambers here combined to expose gun grabbers. And in 23 of those 28, gun owners got the message, gun owners heard what happened here in Des Moines, and gun owners booted those guys to the curb. And in the process, from 10 and 12 and 14 and 16, this entire building has shifted. You had times in the past when pro-gun Senate majority leaders or Senate presidents like the deceased Mary Lundby who would introduce assault weapons legislation. That was what passed for Republicans working on gun politics in this building back in the days of like 2006, 2007, in that genre. You fast forward a couple years and things have changed. You see anti-gunners now scared to death of gun owners. You see them offering up suppressor bills. You see them offering up bills to allow you to carry on a four-wheeler. You see them doing things desperate to avoid the pressure because they know that because of the donors, activists and volunteers of Iowa gun owners, a day of reckoning is coming every 2 years in the most vulnerable members of their caucus. And that is how you move bills. That's how it's done. But you can never get there if you're afraid of making politicians upset at you or making them angry. If you're afraid about that, you're going to do nothing, which is what the Iowa Firearms Coalition has done for a very long time when it comes to elections here in Iowa. Guys, like I said, there's a sickness in this building, a sick, incestuous relationship in this building. If you come down here and you play the game the way everybody else does, everybody's going to sing your praises. They're going to love you. They're going to think you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. And they're going to praise you on the floor of the legislature. If you don't, they're going to attack you. They're going to try to smear you. They're going to try to shut you down. And maybe that's why I'm always so surly when I come up here. My daughter says, "Dad, you never smile in your videos." I always say, "Annalise, I'm smiling. Look at me." This is what happens down here if you hold these guys accountable. But this is the only way that we can pass gun bills in the state, by drawing a line and going after anybody who would dare cross it. And that's how we've done this. The Iowa Firearms Coalition, they sat by as Matt Windschitl tried to gut the key component of stand your ground law. They sat by as capital carry, preemption reform, the permit to purchase, as all these things were weakened this year. They sat by last year as Sodders and Windschitl worked a deal to have a searchable online database. They sat by as Republicans in the House in 2012 in the committees with Clell Baudler gutted their own bills. They sat by as the Republicans in the House voted against constitutional carry here in 2011. And as a result, people love them up here, and that's fine. If that's how these guys want to roll, that's fine. That's not our goal. That's not who we are, and that's why we're going to continue to pass gun rights legislation. Sadly, again, these guys have traded, they have traded public praise from politicians at the expense of your gun rights, and that is the dirty deal that's been going on down here for a very long time. One last thing before I close this video down. Let's be clear about one thing, and that is the credit for the passage of Stand Your Ground law legislation. You've heard a lot about this over the last couple of days. Who deserves the credit? I'll tell you right now, Representative Windschitl, in one area, we agree 100%. The credit does not belong to me. The credit does not belong to him. Doesn't belong to the House or to the Senate. Doesn't even belong to Senator Rick Bertrand, who bled on this issue for years up here. The only entity responsible for the passage of Stand Your Ground law here in Iowa, if it in fact does become law, is you. Hundreds of thousands of grassroots gun owners that put nonstop pressure on this building. Your calls, your emails, your messages to the Capitol, and your donations to enable us to run a huge election program last year, you guys paved the way for passage of Stand Your Ground law. You see, it was easy this year for Matt Windschitl to come down here and move Stand Your Ground law through the House. After all, you guys had leveled the playing field. The Senate was pro-gun governor, pro-gun House. Should be easy. All he had to do was not screw it up. All he had to do was run the bill clean and get it through the House. He couldn't even do that without needing support, as in like heavy support and pressure from gun owners like you. And you are the ones, as a result, We get the credit and the praise for the passage of Stand Your Ground law in 2017. You see, my job is not to come here and educate and beg 150 people's backsides. All I have to do is sound the alarm, and you guys kick them in the backside if they don't do the right thing. And that's how it works. And for that reason, you guys get the credit. And also, one final note, it's that same tactic and that same philosophy that's going to enable us to pass constitutional carry here in Iowa as well. That was our founding issue in 2009 through 2011. The Iowa Firearms Coalition opposed the bill. They said it was too extreme, it wasn't the right time. They may support it now because now it's in vogue and now it's hip because it's on the move all across the country. This was our founding issue. We're going back to this now, assuming that Governor Branstad enacts Stand Your Ground law legislation. I'm telling you right now, the way we're going to pass that is by these same tactics: holding people accountable, making them vote on the bills, and being there in their districts at election time, if necessary, to remind the voters what they did on these bills. I can guarantee you this: begging and pleading and whining and asking for your rights back with a mild manner, that will not get it done. Is it going to happen in 2018? Can I guarantee that? Absolutely not. What I can guarantee is that just like with your help, we have seen now dozens of failed political careers line the gutter of Iowa history in our multi-year fight to pass Stand Your Ground law. I can assure you there's always room for more failed political careers to fall in the gutter of political history here in Iowa. And we will fight them tooth and nail until this happens here in Iowa. Guys, hope that explains why you've seen so much animosity towards our organization and towards me over the last couple of days. And I want to tell you, if this appeals to you, if this no compromise, no holds barred, bare knuckle style of fighting for our gun rights and for our freedoms appeals to you, then I would welcome you to join Iowa gun owners and share this video far and wide so everybody knows the truth, what's been happening here for the last couple of years. If you're already a supporter and a donor of Iowa gun owners, you have my deepest, humblest gratitude, because without your support, we can't do any of this. We can't run any election programs. We can't encourage or inform and expose anybody in this building or outside of it. Thank you so much. If you're on the fence out there, guys, time to get off the fence and get involved. Carry is waiting in the balance, and it needs your support. And finally, a message again to the grassroots supporters of the Iowa Firearms Coalition. You're probably hearing this stuff for the first time. You're probably feeling pretty ticked off and pretty angry that you've been calling the Capitol for years on bills that were gutted, stuffed, and weakened, and the whole time your lobbyist did nothing about it. And he, in fact, told you guys it was a good bill and encouraged you guys to call the Capitol. If you guys want to get off that crazy train, if you want to get involved in a group that will never lie to you, that will always call a spade, we welcome you with open arms. Because gun rights here in Iowa is not about credit, it's about getting the job done. And with your help, we're going to keep doing that. And last but not least, let's not forget our primary purpose: to mobilize gun owners to talk to politicians. We do not yet have this bill signed by Governor Branstad. So call Governor Branstad's office today at 515-281-5211 and make sure he signs Stand Your Ground law here in Iowa, House File 517. Let's get back to work, guys. Thank you so much and have a great day.